Chapter 11-12. So what? Bojio asked. When she drove past the shop, she stopped the car. The black boss had just been interrogated by the police and was in a bad mood. He didn't even lift his head. What do you want? Bojio's fingers touched the pair of furry black cat ears hanging on the wall. This. Hey, it's you again. The black boss finally found someone to complain to. Brother, I misunderstood you just now. You don't know, but after you left, I was interrogated again. Seriously, my customers were so scared that they didn't dare to come in. Bojio remained calm. Why did they ask you again? They asked me if there was anything I forgot to say. The black man shrugged. They even asked if the man was suspicious. If you ask me, they underestimate the grudges between women. They should start from this aspect. Bojio arched a brow. What do you mean? It's simple. The black man took out two props even though they couldn't bear to look at them. Before number 2 appeared, number 1's sales were far ahead. The moment number 2 appeared, she acted arrogantly in front of number 1 every day. Do you think number 1 would be angry? Let me tell you a secret. I saw the girl from before. After her boyfriend cheated on her, her eyes turned frighteningly dark. It's really frightening when a girl looks at someone like that. Mainly, she wasn't looking at the man but the other girl. It's not an exaggeration to say that she has a motive to kill. Bojio frowned. But she shouldn't be the murderer. According to what you said, aren't the 2 victims in this case? That's why I'm curious. The black man shook his head. Ever since this incident, my business hasn't been good. 2 girls died in the vicinity and both of them came to my shop. The messy information caused her thoughts to lose track of what to do. What do you think of the man? The store manager pursed his lips. Apart from being a bit of a playboy, there's nothing else. In some ways, it's easier to get hold of Chinese girls here. You probably don't know this. I have to say something on behalf of the Chinese girls. Not all girls are like that. You've only met a small portion of them. In China, there are many girls who have self-respect, love, and strive to improve themselves. They are warm, pure, down-to-earth, clean, and dutiful. They have done amazing things together but are humble. They will stand up for injustice, they admire and respect others, they persevere in their dreams and work hard for it. That's how they exist. The store manager was probably used to the youngster's short sentences. He paused for a moment, using his fist to bump Bojio's shoulder. It's good to have such a girl. I'm being biased. If you have the chance in the future, you can go to Wuxia. Bojio smiled. You will definitely like it there. You can also sell your goods there. Oh, brother, I always thought that you Chinese were very shy and couldn't accept it. Bojio played with the cat ears on her hand. This thing is used everywhere. Why can't you accept it? The store manager laughed heartily. It was a very pleasant shopping experience. However, the Lamborghini little blackie seemed to have waited for a long time. When Bojio entered, the navigation system rippled. Such low efficiency, it doesn't seem like master's style. It changed the manager's view of Chinese girls. Bojio reversed the car with one hand. The navigation system fell silent for a few seconds before replying, Master, you've changed. Bojio, MMH? Little blackie, in the past you never spoke up for anyone. Bojio, I know now. Little blackie, why? Bojio, because it's not just me. Little blackie, what do you mean? Bojio, I'm not the only one doing these things. There are many people who are speaking out against injustice. I've seen them in China. They are a group of great girls. They are full of passion and aren't inferior to men. I don't want the day when they have the chance to go overseas, they will still be looked at with prejudice. Little blackie. Human emotions are really complicated. For example, Master, when it comes to the little vixen you like, you clearly don't want him to leave. Why did you remind me to let him drive me away? It's really contradictory. Bojio turned on the highlight. When the light reflected in her eyes, there was a faint glow. Because no matter how much I want him to stay, he doesn't belong here. He can only be Chinemo where he belongs. No matter how intelligent little blackie was, it wouldn't be able to understand such human emotions. Bojio didn't tell Chinemo about the memories he had lost because of this. If he knew, how was the Almighty going to treat her? Should he catch her or not? Besides, when they had been young, he had said that he wanted to raise her into a lady. He would probably frown when he saw the current her. Since he had chosen to lose his memories, it must be because those memories were too painful for him. It would be great if the Almighty could remember. But if he couldn't, she wasn't willing to tear open his wounds and let him feel the pain again. Bojio wasn't sure what exactly had happened back then. But basically she only had one goal now. to destroy the organization that had tampered with the Almighty's body and impersonated him to plot against her. The maiden's sacrifice. Bojio lowered her lids and looked at the string of numbers on her phone. After she stopped the car, she didn't enter the castle. Instead, she tapped on the screen and sent a message. Hoshino, I think I still need you. The night was dark. The castle seemed extremely serene under the moonlight. On the other side of the earth, a man had just woken up. He reached out to open the fridge door and held a bag of milk in his mouth. After biting it open, he saw the cat lying in the living room. He walked over with a smile on his face, clear and smooth. He was wearing home clothes, which hung loosely on his shoulders. After he squatted down, the clothes hung loosely. The cat meowed, sticking out its tongue to lick the man's outstretched palm. I was picked up. I didn't expect to become a traitor on the first day. Yu Cixin's hair was tied back like silk. It was hard to imagine a man with such a hairstyle and still looked sharp and handsome. You won't eat anything when I feed you. Hoshino will feed you. Who exactly picked you up? Yu Cixin asked as he picked up the cat. Hoshino saved the cat and replied, There's milk on the table. Go drink it. It was rare to see Yu Cixin pouting, but he seemed to be obedient. He held the bag of milk in his mouth and kicked something away. When is the competition? It's been boring recently. You can go for a friendly match now. You're the one who isn't participating. As Hoshino spoke, his fingers stroked the kitten's back and he seemed to laugh. This kitten looks quite like you. Are you kidding? How can such a weak little thing look like me? Yu Cixin had the blood of the Black Dao. He supported his forehead with one hand and exuded a noble arrogance. Is it worthy? Hoshino was about to speak when his pocket vibrated. It was a different ringtone. Hoshino put down what he was doing and straightened his body. His side profile was handsome, like a porcelain jade plated with a layer of something else. When he saw the message, he pressed the screen. Got it, I'll head over immediately. Yu Cixin watched as Hoshino entered the room. When he came out, there was a black leather suitcase in his hands. Where are you going? Yu Cixin's brows gradually furrowed. Hoshino didn't have anything to hide from him. America. What about the competition? Yu Cixin's voice lowered. Hoshino didn't turn back. I can come back before the competition. As the door closed, Yu Cixin stood up. The more he looked at the cat, the more uncomfortable he felt. Then he picked it up again. Hoshino has always had bad taste. Like me? What a lousy analogy. Your brother Hoshino is willing to die for little Spade. If he likes her so much, he can just marry her. Meow meow. The only reply he got was the meow of a cat. Outside the castle, Bojio sat in the car, her head lowered as she sent messages. She didn't know that while she was doing this, Chinemo was standing on the balcony of the second floor. He seemed to have been waiting for someone for a long time. The night dew stuck to the ends of his hair. It was a little wet. He originally thought that someone would come up immediately. From this angle, it was obvious what she was doing with her phone. Or rather, she was contacting someone. Chinemo tightened his grip on the railing. Then he released it. His gaze deepened. At this moment, Bojio confirmed Hoshino's schedule. Just as she was about to close the message page, her eyes lit up in the next moment. Could it be? Bojio slammed the car door with a bang. The black Lamborghini was still complaining about her violence. Bojio had already walked up the stairs and pushed the door open. She looked at Chinemo, who was standing in front of the window. Brother Emo, I know what that string of numbers is. 9 squares. Chinmo's voice was neither fast nor slow. The 3 words caused Bojio to pause. She asked helplessly, when did you guess it? You really couldn't guess it when you were here. Chinemo was nonchalant. After all, Sugar Daddy is so stupid. His thoughts will affect each other. In reality, it was true that his thoughts would be affected. A certain someone was swaying in front of him and all he wanted to do was kiss her. Bojio shrugged. Alright, so what was that sentence? Sugar Daddy, you seem to have forgotten that you kidnapped me and took away my phone. Bojio swore that she could hear the mockery in the word Sugar Daddy. The Almighty's mockery was always present when it wasn't easy. Show me my phone. Bojio reached out to pass the phone to Chinemo unexpectedly. Almighty Chin's gaze landed on the pair of fluffy ears. What is this? Bojio. Oh no, I forgot to cover it up. Chapter 11:13. I'm a Mitch, I bought it for fun. Bojio sounded guilty, but she didn't show it on her face. Her eyes were filled with smiles. Brother Emo, the password is important. Chinemo smirked, his lips lifting. He didn't say much, meaning to let her off the hook for the time being. He reached out to take the phone, his fingers pausing when he reached for the WeChat. In the end, he didn't tap on anything. Instead, he opened his profile picture, pulled out the 9-grid pinyin and pressed the numbers. 8464, according to the 9-grid pinyin, it should start with the letter T. After that, the word ting came out. 7486, say pretty? Bojio narrowed her eyes. I heard. That's right. Chin Mo continued pressing. 64 U53 Ku 94 122 64 help 96 I. Bojio's eyes darkened as the words appeared one by one. I heard you can help me kill someone? Chin Mo replied faintly. Bojio frowned. That's weird, this is from the victim. Why is she the one who died? Find all their chat records. Chin Mo's gaze deepened. That's the only way to find out the reason. Bojio turned on the computer and pulled out the photo. This is the person's reply. Bojio pointed to the blank profile picture. Chin Mo was at the side typing on his phone. Sure, what's the name? Bojio instinctively knew that the next reply would be the main point. Who exactly did the victim want him to kill? The phone rang again. Xuanhuan. Chin Mo frowned when he saw the two words. The other victim? Bojio's gaze was different from Chin Mo's. Brother Mo, did Xuanhuan die before Mo? That's according to the report. Chin Mo was deep in thought. Bojio replied, I received news today that Xuanhuan stole Mo's boyfriend and they had a conflict before. There is indeed a motive for murder, but this is obviously a series of murders. The two of them aren't related to the other victims and Mo was killed not long after. Bojio replied. There is no conflict between being killed and wanting to kill. Chin Mo interrupted her calmly. At this moment he was analyzing everything from the perspective of criminal psychology. If that's the case, one of my suspicions would be resolved. Bojio turned. What is it? Every crime there are always two murderers. Chin Mo paused for a moment. No, I should say that the murderer has an accomplice. Even though the accomplice isn't obvious, it's important. No one can commit murder for free, and there isn't any mention of money in the chat. There must be other conditions such as helping with something? Chapter 11:14. Just because she doesn't like to talk doesn't mean she wouldn't want to kill someone. Chin Mo's voice was calm. Sometimes, when the grudge accumulates to a certain extent, such thoughts would appear. But there is one thing, the murderer might not have used her as an accomplice on Xuanhuan. Bojio raised a brow. The other victims. That's just my conjecture. Evidence is needed to confirm it. Chin Mo reached for the phone beside him and typed out the murderer's last words. I've sent you what you need to do in your mailbox, open it. Mailbox. Bojio narrowed her eyes. This is... Chin Mo's voice didn't change. It might be the school's mailbox. Usually, such mailboxes aren't used, it's not surprising that the police missed it. I'll go to the school tomorrow. Bojio smiled. Even though she hadn't been to the school much in the past, she was already familiar with it. She just had to climb over the walls. From the current clues, the murderer must have told Mo something important. Chin Mo placed his phone down and glanced up at her, his voice calm. I'm going to sleep. So early? Bojio arched a brow, her hands moving faster than her mouth. Chin Mo glanced at a certain someone who was tugging at his shirt, his handsome face tilted over, hinting for her to let go. Bojio laughed, a hint of playfulness in her voice. Brother Mo, I bought Burger King and Coke. Let's play some games and sleep? I don't have a computer or a phone. Chin Mo's gaze was calm. Bojio took a moment. Wait. With that, she went downstairs to the study room. She opened the drawer. There were at least a dozen phones inside. They were all different brands and models. These were her usual tools. She casually picked one up and tested it. The reaction wasn't bad. She connected to the wireless network and returned to the room. Brother Mo, you can use my phone, I'll use this. Chin Mo smirked. Aren't you afraid I'll contact someone? That's my alternate account, there's no one on it. You won't be able to contact anyone. Bojio smiled, looking especially obedient. Chin Mo arched a brow at such a deceptive fox. He glanced at the game name on the phone screen, his lips twitching. Bojio coughed lightly. Despite all her calculations, she had missed out on his nickname. Chin Mo is my little secretary? Chin Mo scoffed again. Bojio could hear the mockery in his voice. Chin Mo's fingers slid across the screen. The things that the sugar daddy thinks about every day are no different from a dream. Bojio thought to herself, I wanted to kidnap you, but I still managed to kidnap you. I can even sleep later. How is it a dream? But Bojio wasn't stupid enough to say these words. She sat on the sofa lazily, her black jacket still on her body. She took a straw and inserted it into the cola. Qin Mo sat beside her. What hero? Whatever, since Brother Mo is here, I can win without doing anything. Bojo chewed on a French fry, thinking that the medicine should be almost done. Qin Mo glanced sideways at him. I'm playing with one hand. How can you win without doing anything? Then I'll carry Brother Mo to win without doing anything. Bojo smiled, choosing a champion she often played. The game started. Qin Mo was really operating with one hand. He typed 3 words. Training champion. His teammates' first reaction was that this game was a little risky. Fortunately, he chose Fatten, the kind that wouldn't die easily. His teammates didn't think it was a bad idea. They were all playing with alternate accounts and their levels were all low. Bojo's style of playing this game was completely different from her usual style. She kept thinking about the medicine in the cola, her speed of killing beasts was very slow and she only relied on normal attacks. Actually, his teammates were wrong about one thing. In this game, anyone who played in the middle lane played a very important role. The top laner would defend the tower on the top lane. As long as he could defend it for 4 minutes, he would be a good top laner. After all, he had to fight against at least 2 people alone. Sometimes there would be an ambush in the bushes. The jungler assassin didn't support the top lane within 4 minutes. He wasn't a good jungler. But these weren't as important as the middle lane. Playing in the middle lane wasn't just about defending the defense tower. He had to look at the small map at all times to support at any time. Hence, Qin Mo's position was rather important. Even in such a small game, no one would come to the jungle. Qin Mo was already used to it. He zoomed in on the small map to look at his own jungle. When he saw that a certain someone didn't even use any skills when fighting the beasts, he arched a brow. Are you having fun with the blue beasts? Bojo finished her fries and glanced back at her phone. She was about to be beaten to death by the blue beast. An assassin being beaten to death by the blue beast. That was a bad idea. Bojo thought for a moment. She decided to take action first. If not, she would always be thinking about the cola. With that in mind, she glanced over at the Almighty who was lowering his lids and playing the game. The Almighty was probably the only one who had the time to stare at her while fighting the Fatten with one hand. It was impossible for him not to lose HP. But based on the Almighty's habit of calculating his HP and skills, if he didn't leave the tower, the opponent wouldn't be able to do anything to him. Even at his level, he liked to stay in the team. 3 of them came at once. One of the assassins was still hiding in the bushes. With a swing of his rod, the Almighty's hand flashed and he released another skill. The 3 of them lost HP at the same time. Of course, the damage wasn't enough. Qin Mo was still standing at the bottom of the tower, his voice slow. Look at your phone. Bojo. He even noticed her peeping. Bojo had an ulterior motive. She fought a beast and picked up the cola. The straw touched Qin Mo's lips. Young Master Qin didn't usually drink such things, but since it was sent over by a certain someone, it wasn't the same. He took 2 sips and said, "Come over to collect the kills." All right. Bojo smiled when she saw the Almighty drinking the cola. She lifted her knife and released a skill on the beasts. She used her big move to climb over the wall and entered the crowd. She used her second skill to freeze the enemy. With Qin Mo's one-handed skill, she locked onto the enemy. The enemy sorcerer wanted to freeze her, but the moment she used her skill, Bojo appeared behind her. The sound of a knife rang out. Go. The first HP was in her hands. When she turned back, she met the archer with low HP. She swung her knife. Double kill. Bojo's HP dropped by half. The assassin in the bushes wanted to hit her with a stick. Right at this moment, Bojo used her big move and jumped back into the defense tower. No one could catch her. That wasn't all. Qin Mo took the chance to use his big move and attract the enemy. Bojo turned back with her knife. There were 2 swishing sounds. 3 kill. The news from the middle lane shocked the other 3 teammates. But in their eyes, Fa Tan wasn't the strongest. After Bojo collected the kills, she turned to observe Qin Mo. She didn't forget to switch out of the game to check the time. When she entered again, she realized she was dead. Dead. Bojo arched a brow. The assassin shouldn't have revived. When did he come over to collect the kills? Qin Mo glanced at a certain someone. He turned and tapped on her screen. How does it feel to be killed by the defense tower? Bojo. It was better to be killed by the blue beast. But she noticed something. After the Almighty finished speaking, he reached out and pulled open his shirt collar. Even his handsome face looked much better than usual. 3 minutes had passed. The drug should be starting to take effect. With that thought in mind, Bojo dashed into the crowd once more. But this time she forgot to use her skills and position. She was instantly killed. Qin Mo tilted his head his thin lips asking, "Are you a spy sent by the other party?" Bojo chewed on another fry, a hint of playfulness in her voice. "Brother Imo, I only died twice. Look at the bottom lane, I died 4 times. If you want to talk about who is the spy, it's me. My HP drops quickly when they attack me. Do you still want to win?" Chinamo asked slowly. Bojo chuckled. "Yes." Chinamo didn't reply. If he couldn't even tell her state, he couldn't be a criminal psychologist. She seemed distracted and he couldn't tell what she was thinking. The only thing Chinamo could think of was the person she had contacted in the car before she went upstairs. This caused his fingers to pause for a moment. Just for a moment. The opponent's sorcerer had hit him with a fireball. On top of that, he used an ultimate move. The 3 of them had surrounded him. He definitely wouldn't be able to leave. He watched as the character fell on the screen. Chinamo tugged his collar, as though that was the only way to ease his annoyance. However, his eyes were cold. Bojo was surprised that the Almighty had died. Logically speaking, even if it was done with one hand, the Almighty wouldn't be affected if he didn't leave the tower. Was it because of the drug? Bojo pondered over it. That was the only possibility. She smiled. It seemed like she was close to success. Chinamo didn't know where his annoyance came from. But the player at the bottom lane was still shouting, "Fatten, don't send me off. Stay under the tower and don't come out when you practice your hero." A person who had died 6 times didn't have the right to say such things. But Chinamo wasn't paying attention to it. His heart wasn't calm, which was why his lips were dry. He placed his phone down and reached for the cola beside him. After taking a few sips, he returned to the game. Bojo sat at the side, smiling brightly. It seemed like the drug had taken effect. Otherwise, according to the Almighty's habits, he wouldn't have taken the initiative to drink the cola. The game was a distraction. Moreover, Chinamo was hiding something in his heart. When he realized that something was wrong, his side was already fighting against the Beast King and the opponent was fighting against him. He paused for a moment and furrowed his brows. He turned his gaze to the side and looked at the cola on the side. Chapter 11:15. Bojo noticed Chinmo's gaze and started to feel guilty. Chinamo started to feel thirsty. He wanted to raise his hand but realized he didn't have enough strength. He glanced up at the youngster and placed his phone down. His voice was still calm but there was a hint of hoarseness. "What did you put in the Coke?" Bojo shifted her gaze and looked up. She smiled and replied slyly, "It won't affect my health." Chinamo chuckled again, his palms heating up. "You've grown up." Bojo felt a little guilty. "Brother Imo, if it's too hot, do you want to take off your clothes?" Chinamo didn't reply. He pushed her away and walked into the bathroom. He turned on the cold water and the water splashed onto his body. His black hair fell onto his forehead. His white shirt was half open and his collarbone could be seen clearly. What's more, the wet shirt stuck to his body, accentuating his figure even more. This was the scene Bojo saw when she walked in. Chinamo had already turned off the shower. Through the mist, everything seemed hazy. Bojo felt a little regretful. It would have been better if she hadn't drugged him or asked for the antidote. When she saw the Almighty taking a cold shower, she felt that drugging him was a bad idea. Unexpectedly, the Almighty walked back to the bed, his voice coming over. "Is this how Sugar Daddy does things? He only cares about drugging him and doesn't care about the consequences. I'll make you comfortable." Bojo thought for a moment before reaching out to push him onto the floor. The room was made of wood and covered with a soft black carpet. Hence, Chinamo didn't feel any pain when he laid on the bed. But the words he was supposed to say were uttered by a certain someone. It made him want to rub his forehead. Bojo watched the Almighty's cold expression and didn't know where to start. Chinamo continued to let her press on him. He arched a brow but didn't say anything. The receiver was still by his ear. The shadow guards were about to speak. Chinamo lifted his hand and turned off the receiver's signal. The shadow guards were still listening. What's going on with young master? The black-bellied Chinmo's thoughts were simple. He didn't want these people to disturb his sleep. As for Bojo, she laid down obediently under him. Alright, she could be called obedient for the time being. In any case, the Almighty lying quietly under her made her heart itch. Bojo finally understood what it meant to be a femme fatale. He was indeed a demon. Especially at this time. What's the first step? Bojo muttered to herself. I should check the strategy first. Chinmo's body was burning. He knew the effects of the medicine. If he was really unhappy, he could take a shower. He wanted to see how far someone could go. Who knew that he didn't even know what to do first. To think that he had taught her so much. It seemed that all her intelligence was used on playing games and playing on the computer. She was really naive in other aspects. "Let's kiss him first," Bojo said, her eyes sparkling. Her smile was devilish and mischievous. Chapter 11:16. Qin Mo's entire body was burning. He knew the effects of the drug. If he really wasn't happy, a shower would solve it. He wanted to see how far she could go. Who knew she didn't even know what to do? He had taught her so much. It seemed like all her intelligence was used on gaming and the computer. She was really naive in other aspects. "Let's kiss him first," Bojo said, her eyes sparkling. Her smile was devilish and mischievous, but Bojo hesitated when the Almighty looked at her. Qin Mo's expression looked a little indifferent. His peach blossom eyes were very distinct, and there was a hint of coldness in them. He had a noble air that couldn't be offended. In order to make things seem more natural, Qin Mo tilted his head to the side when Bojo was about to kiss him. The kiss that should have landed on his lips ended up landing on the Almighty's chin. Bojo was slightly depressed at the unfavorable start. But it wasn't a huge blow to her sugar daddy, who wasn't a proud little fairy. With the Almighty's looks, he had the right to be reserved. The second time, Bojo leaned forward again. Her thin lips finally landed on the right place. She touched his slightly cold lips lightly, savoring the unique warmth. The person beneath her didn't reject her, but he didn't seem moved. Bojo moved the kiss away. She glanced at the calm peach blossom eyes and leaned forward. She leaned over and whispered in his ear, "Brother Mo, I've already confessed, but you're still unmoved. This is the only way. Gangster, you still have to find an excuse." Qin Mo's gaze deepened. Bojo stood up, her thin lips lifting. "I'll help Brother Mo undress first. It's uncomfortable to wear this." "Haven't you thought about the consequences of your actions?" Qin Mo asked slowly. Bojo muttered, "You're leaving anyway." Her words were muffled. Qin Mo didn't catch her words clearly. He glanced at the person sitting on his waist. He reached out and pulled his shirt open. Qin Mo felt the heat on his body rising. It was a feeling any man would understand. However, a certain someone was very slow. He was good at flirting, but he didn't take care of the areas that he should. Qin Mo couldn't help but clench his right hand by his side, as though this was the only way he could control himself and not press her down. He couldn't be too presumptuous. After all, the Almighty wanted someone to take the initiative. Bojo was smart enough to know that medicine wasn't much of a threat to the Almighty. When she reached out, she didn't forget to cuff his uninjured hand to the foot of the bed. Qin Mo's eyes deepened. "If I were you, I would dispel your foolish thoughts, little Gio. Brother Mo, you're talking about locking you up." Bojo smiled mischievously. She leaned over and kissed the corner of Qin Mo's lips. She said righteously, "I'm afraid the medicine isn't safe. If that's the case, Brother Mo won't be able to escape. Brother Mo, you have no idea how many times I've thought about it. You should just let me kiss you obediently without any resistance. Now that you're in this state, it's really tempting." This was the first time Qin Mo couldn't do anything to someone. He parted his lips and spat out, "You're dead meat." "Brother Mo, look, I didn't even say a word when you did things to me previously." Bojo smiled. "Anyway, the winner takes all and the loser warms the bed. Brother Mo, be magnanimous." Qin Mo watched as she kissed him again. This time it was on his collarbone. It was a seductive kiss. Qin Mo felt as though he was on fire. He watched a certain someone's fair and clean face in her actions. His breathing started to get messy. However, she wasn't conscious at all. She reached out and unbuckled his belt. "Brother Mo, be good, I'll be gentle." Bojo wanted to appease the Almighty since her methods were indeed despicable. In some romance novels, when the supporting female couldn't get the male lead, she would resort to drugging him. She hadn't expected that she would use it one day. If the Almighty was determined not to let her touch him, she would respect him. The effects of the drug probably made the Almighty less reserved. When she sensed Qin Mo's breathing, Bojo smiled. "Brother Mo, you want it too, right?" When the youngster said this, she tilted her body and whispered into his ear. It was filled with the scent of candy, tempting him to commit a crime. Qin Mo's throat rolled. He didn't want to wait any longer. He couldn't stand a certain someone either. With a single hand, he turned around and pulled her into his embrace. Bojo stilled, a trace of surprise flashing across her large, dark eyes. His next train of thought was interrupted by the kiss that landed on his face. It was a kiss that could suck all the air out of her and make her mind go blank. It was truly irresistible. Even her breathing was filled with his scent. It smelled so good that Bojo's hands softened. When he felt that it was about time, he left her lips, his voice unique. "You drugged me for this, right? This is the real kiss. What was that just now? Just a touch." Bojio could faintly hear his hot breath landing beside her ears. His deep voice carried a hint of mockery. "I've never seen someone as stupid as you." Bojio wanted to retort, but it was obvious that the Almighty wasn't going to give her the chance. The heat seemed to be contagious. Even through their clothes, the Almighty had the ability to captivate her soul. The numbness continued to spread. The temperature in the room rose. Chinmo's voice was hoarse. "Release the handcuffs." Bojio knew he didn't like to be locked up. Hence, she released the handcuffs as though she was releasing a ferocious tiger. Chinmo carried her up, pressing her against the soft blanket. It was probably due to the effects of the drug. That night, Chinmo seemed to have completely let go. He didn't have any reservations, taking the person in his arms over and over again. The numbness never subsided. She listened to that person constantly calling her name. Bojio had to grab onto something to prevent the sound from coming out. "Bojio." It was the Almighty's voice, slightly deep. "Bojio." He seemed to be waiting for her response. She only responded with an N, and was immediately swept into an extreme numbness. The classic European-style bed swayed her silver hair. Her snow-white skin was eye-catching, a form of visual enchantment. Chinmo reached out and held onto the man's waist. He wanted to make sure that he was the only one in his eyes. The night sky darkened. The curtains were drawn. The moon didn't appear, but the temperature in the room didn't drop. It was just like the effects of the drug on Chinmo's body. When the person was willing, the drug's effects would be amplified. Before Bojio fell asleep, she wondered if she had put too much powder in the cola. It was rare for her to have such a peaceful sleep. Hence, Bojio didn't know that after she closed her eyes, Chinmo hugged her. Chinmo hugged her. The bedsheets couldn't be used anymore, so he placed his windbreaker on the blanket. He lay on it and let her sleep in his arms. "Idiot." The two words were filled with an unprecedented amount of love. His fingers brushed aside the stray hair on Bojio's forehead. Chinmo moved, planting a kiss on her. This trip wasn't a loss. Given his personality, he wouldn't have been so proactive. In reality, the drug still lingered in Chinmo's body. It was obvious that someone was too tired. When the sun was about to rise, Bojio was half asleep when she heard a low chuckle. "Do you still want more?" He didn't wait for her reply. The man began to move again. His movements were extremely gentle, so gentle that she felt as though she was the one being drugged. The next day, in order to prevent Grandfather Butler from knocking on the door, before entering the room, Bojio had sent Grandfather Butler a message, asking him to come later. That night, both of them slept very soundly. Since Chinmo was really drugged, he woke up later than Bojio. When Bojio opened her eyes, she felt a little guilty. When she saw the handsome face in front of her, she smiled. This person was hers again. There was nothing that couldn't be solved with a good night's sleep. If there was, she would sleep with him twice. From her perspective, the drugging last night had been a success. The only thing that wasn't successful was her soft-heartedness. She had unlocked the Almighty and lost her dominant position. But that didn't matter, as long as her goal was achieved. Bojio reached her hand out, wanting to push the Almighty's black hair away. But the next second, her fingers paused. Even if it was small. She had always worked with computers. Hence she knew what it was. It was a small listening device. It was small enough to be placed beside his ear and hidden in his black hair. It was waterproof. These things usually came from the military. Bojio wasn't stupid. Such a small thing was enough for her to understand what was going on. Why did the kidnapping become so easy? It was because from the beginning to the end, everything had been within this person's calculations. Grandfather Butler had already reminded her to be more reserved as a girl. But she hadn't listened. She had forgotten that in his eyes, other than being herself, she had another identity, Z. It wasn't because her plan was flawless. Compared to him, she was just playing with an axe. Such a receiver would have an automatic positioning function. Ever since he had come to the castle, he had been searching for information about her. Bojio wasn't stupid. She knew it. But she hadn't expected that he would only know what he was doing. She didn't know that when he was doing it, he had already told others about his location. Bojio knew that sooner or later he would leave. But at this moment, the moment she found the receiver, it was as though a basin of water had been poured over her. Her entire body felt cold. Chapter 11:17. She couldn't stay here anymore. It wouldn't matter if she was the only one here. But Grandfather Butler was here. For a family of hackers, it was basic to never expose themselves in front of others. Moreover, it was the Bo family. Bojio sat up, lowering her head to wear yesterday's clothes. When she glanced up, she had regained her usual expression. She had to inform Grandfather Butler to evacuate. As for the Almighty, his hand had been healed. She wouldn't stop him anymore. But she had thought they would be together for a longer time. The youngster stood in front of the dressing mirror, looking at himself in the mirror. After about 10 seconds he reached out his hand to press his fringe. Even though the corners of her lips were lifted, she didn't look like she was smiling. There was a hint of loneliness in her. However, that sense of desolation disappeared the moment she pushed open the door to the room. Because the old butler was in the living room. At this time, as a qualified butler, he was brewing his black tea. It was an English-style teacup with beautiful patterns. The old butler was an exquisite person, especially when it came to eating and drinking. Those who knew their stuff would definitely recognize the golden spoon in his hand and the handmade machine on the dining table. It was perfect for brewing coffee. But it was obvious that even though he was a local, he loved tea more. As the fragrance of the tea spread, the cheesecake on the dining table was ready. When the old butler saw Bojio, he held onto the teapot, looking like a butler from a vampire movie from the 19th century. He reached out to pull out the wooden chair. "Young lord, you must be hungry. Have some tea first." "All right." Bojio had never rejected her grandfather butler. She picked up the fork and cut a mouthful of the cheesecake. She stuffed a big mouthful, puffing up her face as she gave the old butler a thumbs up. The old butler broke into a smile. "Speaking of which, this high school student looks very similar to young lord. There's something different." Bojio reached out to point at her eyes, her words unclear. "This is black." "Oh right, young lord's eyes were gray previously." The old butler glanced at her, nodding. Bojio took a sip of tea, smoothing it down before speaking in a clear voice. "I've seen the original owner's photo. In the past, she didn't have a tear mole by the side of her eye, which was rather strange. After it was changed to me, the tear mole became clearer. I was rather worried that someone would notice the difference. Fortunately, I came back early." She wasn't afraid of being exposed, but she couldn't explain to xianxia that she wasn't her daughter. The old butler poured more tea into her cup, his voice raspy. "It's good that you're back." Bojio couldn't let go of the fifth path because Grandfather Butler was still around. She didn't come back often before. This was the longest time she had spent in the main family. There are a lot of people's information gathered here. There could not be the slightest mistake. There was a case recently. Bojio didn't push the blame onto Chin Mo. Instead, she started talking about the maiden's sacrifice. It was caused by the organization back then. That year, a lot of information was leaked. This time we can't repeat the same mistake. We have to pack up the things here and Grandfather Butler has to move to a safer place. Hearing this, the old butler frowned. "There's no place safer than the main house, is there?" "This time it's different." Bojio placed the teacup down. "This time they are using the human heart. We can't predict the human heart. I'm worried that someone will leak the information." At the same time, in an apartment on the fifth path. In an apartment on Fifth Avenue, the girl sat in front of the computer. Her fingers tapped on the keyboard and her eyes were filled with venom. "Don't be so stubborn. As long as you tell me where Z is, your daughter will be fine. Of course, you can tell Z that I slept with you, but your daughter will kill me. Have you thought about the consequences of your actions?" The person on the other end of the computer didn't give up. The girl smiled. "What consequences can there be? Your daughter is still on my side. You people don't understand them. Let them play. Don't care if there's any meaning in their actions. You just have to care. Get her to study properly. What's so strange about your daughter becoming mine? I won't tell you where Z is." The fat man gritted his teeth. The girl's eyes dimmed. "Then wait and see your daughter kill someone." The fat man was also a hacker. But just like what the girl said, he didn't understand what young people were thinking. He really didn't understand. He also didn't understand why his daughter looked like a person he didn't recognize. The fat man still had his daughter's online preview on his computer. Her comments scared him as a father. She liked other people's things and treated them as her own. After being exposed, she didn't feel that she was wrong. She only felt that other people weren't generous enough. That was the beginning. The further it went, the more frightening it became. She felt that people who defended their rights were creating hype. She wanted to become popular for money. But she never thought that other people lost their lives just for justice. And what she was doing was killing it. Later on, she opened an account and went online to slander people. Just because the person she liked didn't speak according to her thoughts. She turned the truth upside down and spoke without thinking. The fat man felt a little regretful. He regretted all these years. He just wanted his daughter to live a better life. He never thought that one day she would become like this. Another message came through QQ. Was a picture. In the picture, his daughter was in an online environment, talking with fervor and assurance. I just need her to do one thing for me to complete the entire murder process. I have to say that your daughter is really a good helper. This time, our target is the mother of the defender. The fat man's eyes narrowed. His hands on the keyboard tightened. Subconsciously, he wanted to contact the person. I advise you not to move. All your networks are under my surveillance. To be honest, it isn't easy to find hackers like you. If it wasn't for your daughter, I really wouldn't have been able to find a breakthrough. When the girl said this, her eyes were still gloomy. She really couldn't break through the legendary defense network, but so what? She couldn't let anyone die. She couldn't let her daughter become the murderer. The fat man clenched his fists and released them. His eyes were filled with pain. I don't know the specifics. I only know that the family is in an old castle. It is very hidden in the forest. I have only been there once and it was many years ago. You should also know that our young master is in charge now. Young master heh. The girl typed. You better be telling the truth. The fat man typed a line of words. Now that things have reached such a stage, do I dare to lie to you? However, the fat man hid something. He knew the exact location. He said this to stall for time. But if he didn't say anything, the other party would definitely notice that he was lying. There are many castles in America. The girl laughed coldly. But do you think I can't find it? Alright, I forgot to tell you. Your daughter has already made her move. At that moment, the fat man smashed his keyboard on the floor. In the end, his eyes turned red. He typed on the keyboard. It was a string of code. It wasn't an intrusion. It wasn't informing anyone. It was the self-destruction of the system. Once the system self-destructed, it meant that his identity would be removed. In other words, he was using the method of self-destruction to convey information. The girl didn't expect this. She took the information she received and informed her subordinates. Search all the castles around here. Filter out the people who might be Z within 2 days. Yes. A group of mercenaries replied to her. These people were all fugitives. They would do anything as long as they were paid. They were often active outside the borders. The girl wasn't just anyone. She was Fanjia, who had successfully escaped previously. She had said that she would be back. But this time, she chose to take action here because the environment was more convenient for her. Z had ruined her plans time and time again. She had almost died because of it. If it hadn't been for Z, the maiden's sacrifice would have been completed. In the past, she had thought that according to her brother's plan, Z would have been eliminated. She hadn't expected her to still be alive. Other than her brother, no one else had seen Z before. She wasn't an exception. This time she was going to witness Z's death with her own eyes. Also, that ungrateful young man who stole her man from wuxia, she would let him know how powerful she was. She had thought that she would receive news from the Fu father and son soon. She hadn't expected them to be so slow. But she wasn't in a hurry. Once she found Z, she would deal with her private matters. Time trickled by slowly. In the castle. Just as Bojio was about to step out, an app on her phone rang. That noise instantly made her and the old steward stop what they were doing. It was too unusual. The last time she had heard such a sound was when the hacker world was in danger. But this time, Bojio looked at the flickering red dot. Her first reaction was to open her laptop. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. She entered the system she had set up and locked onto the red dot that had self-destructed. The red dot would disappear after a minute. Hence, within this minute, Bojio had to find out what had happened before the self-destruction. When she tried to retrieve the information, her fingers paused. She narrowed her eyes. There was a firewall in the intrusion records? Bojio moved her left hand, avoiding the path. She typed in the code and started to search for the loophole. Found it. QQ. This was a dangerous infiltration method. If she wasn't fast enough, she would be detected. But it was still the same sentence. Speed was the only thing that couldn't be defeated. It was the same for a hacker's intrusion. Her fingers were so fast that only the crackling sounds could be heard in the room. She transformed into a bat on the internet and avoided all the dangers. Then she found the loophole and copied the data. That wasn't the main point. She had to come out before the loophole was fixed. If not, her position would be completely exposed. 6 seconds. There were 6 seconds left. Bojio's fingers moved faster. Her silver hair fell down. Only her handsome and clean side profile could be seen. If Fatty was here, he would definitely clench his fists nervously. The virtual network gate was closing. Swoosh. She escaped the first gate. The third gate was about to close. Once it closed, Bojio would be locked inside. At this moment, the virtual bat increased its speed. It lowered its body and rushed forward. All that was left were its black feathers. Oh, that's right. She didn't just steal successfully. At that moment, Bojo left a mark at a place where the other party wouldn't be able to detect. The so-called mark was just a small code in the other party's source code. This was Z's unique technique. Very few people knew how to use it. In other words, if the other party made another move, Bojo would receive a response. When that happened, she would be able to lock onto the other party's position. However, this didn't make Bojo relax. That was because as long as a hacker had a plan, they wouldn't self-destruct. Self-destruction was the worst way to transmit information. This meant that she wasn't going to receive any good news. Bojo was most worried about the other party's safety. Young lord. The old butler walked over, his expression solemn. Bojo didn't say anything. She opened the source code that she had stolen and started to restore it. It was a chat record. The chat record made Bojo's eyes darken. The old butler frowned and let out a long sigh. Young master, you're right. This battle won't be easy for us. We have to protect the other party first. When Bojo closed her eyes, she could still remember that mother. She was walking near the train station selling cigarettes. She stood up. I'll contact Hoshino now. Upstairs, Chinamo stood at the corner. Even he didn't expect to hear this the moment he came out. This time he just stood there. He thought that the youngster would notice him like before. But she didn't. The youngster seemed to be focused on something else. He picked up his phone, his voice getting further and further away. There was trust in his voice that he had never heard before. Hoshino, I need you. Chinamo tightened his grip on the escalator. It was a little painful, but compared to this feeling, it was more of a dullness. It tugged at his heart. Chinmo's gaze deepened. The tightness in his chest made him stop. He told himself. Something must have happened. Solving the problem was the key. Chinamo walked back to his room and stood by the window for a while. He turned on the receiver. Go and find out what happened in the hacker world recently. Yes, get Fatty to find out. I want to know the news immediately. I'll be back tonight. The shadow guards. Young Master's voice didn't sound right. Were they thinking too much? That shouldn't be the case. Wasn't young Master supposed to be happy? After all, what did young Master Joe do yesterday? Why was he so depressed? Chapter 11:18. On the first floor of the castle. Bojo took her phone and walked to the basement. She told Hoshino everything that had happened. At the airport, the man who was going through the security paused. Z, don't forget that Chinamo is still with you. Bojo's fingers paused. It won't affect me. All right. Hoshino stood tall with a brown leather watch on his wrist. He glanced at the time. I still have an hour before my flight. What do you need me to do? Bojo glanced up. Her actions were strangely handsome. Come back and destroy the enemy. Yes. Hoshino smiled slowly and called out, Young lord. The old butler knew that Bojo was going to be busy. Usually, when something like this happened, she had to do a lot of work in advance. This day, Bojo was in the basement for the entire afternoon. Swoosh. She pulled open the things in front of her. It was a row of drones and a small smart car. If one took a closer look, they would realize that the things tied to the smart car weren't simple. Anyone who was smart would be able to tell that Bojo was making adjustments. The laptop was opened and all the devices were connected through the network. Finally, it was synchronized to her tablet. In the Bo family's house, many things looked normal, but behind the bookshelves, there was a hidden layer. There were rows of skateboards. There were at least 5 or 6 of them. The hacking system had self-destructed. She had to inform someone about this. Bojo had made the firewall personally, which meant that she was the only one who could contact every hacker. The red signal was planted in the firewall. After seeing the signal, in the school, a boy who was studying advanced mathematics pushed his spectacles. He placed the book aside and placed his fingers on the keyboard. Someone at the side teased him. Hey old 5, aren't you reading your book? My child is finally enlightened and knows how to watch porn. The boy didn't say anything. The way he avoided the crowd did seem like he was watching porn. But in reality he opened the signal. His small brows furrowed. He replied with 2 words. Got it. Other than the boy, many others replied at the same time. Those people were all hackers. Without being exposed, everyone sat in front of the computer and began to search with their fingers. Hackers couldn't involve reality. Once it involved reality, they had to protect each other. Now someone was forced to self-destruct. Of course they wouldn't sit still. In an instant, the signal of the entire firewall was scattered all over the network. This way, if anyone had any problems, the other person would know immediately. Not only that, the other party might not know. Once the marked network system was activated, they would immediately lock it down automatically. That's why some people say that you can mess with anyone but hackers. Time passed little by little. Xianxia sat at the dining table. It had been a quiet day for him. A certain guy didn't appear. He didn't receive any more confessions. All he had was the steak and afternoon tea that the old butler had brought to him when it was time. It was obvious that the old butler was much faster than before. Xianxia glanced at the time on the clock. He did not know where that person had gone. However, he knew very well that it was very difficult to sit in one place and wait for someone. Xianxia glanced at the photo on the bookshelf again. This time he didn't reach for it. Instead, he tapped his fingers on the surface. The shadow guards knew that young master had been waiting for news and immediately said, "Young master, I've checked but I'm not sure of the details. There are rumors that the other party is going to make a big move. It seems like a hacker was killed by an unknown organization. It might be a backstabbing." "It's not a backstabbing." Xianxia narrowed his eyes and said in a low voice, "I need to leave this place to check on something. Call the police here and cooperate with me to arrest someone." When the shadow guards heard this, they froze for a moment. What did young master mean? Who was he going to arrest? Young master Jianghu who kidnapped him? Dusk started to fall. The old butler had already transferred a portion of the information that needed to be transferred. Actually, it wasn't difficult to pack it up. He didn't need to bring anything but his tea set and the cutlery that young lord liked to use. This was the most important thing for a qualified butler. Of course, there were some information that would expose young lord's information. Basically, he destroyed everything that could be destroyed. Those that couldn't be destroyed were brought along with him. That included the photo. When he was doing all this, the old butler, who was dressed in a suit, was very calm. In between, he didn't forget to take a look at the red wine pig trotters he made in the kitchen. Young lord loved to eat meat. She was prepared to nourish her brain after doing these things. Using pig trotters to nourish her brain was also a specialty of the Bo family. Bojo liked to squat on the floor and play with these things. She would eat a few mouthfuls of meat and check the data. She wore a pure red t-shirt and turned to light a cigarette. When she held the cigarette in her mouth, her handsome side profile was hard to tell if she was a man or a woman. It could be seen that she was very busy. She was so busy that she would stretch out her hand to twist her neck occasionally. In the end, she was a little tired. She supported herself with one leg and closed her eyes. She seemed to be sleeping. Upstairs. Xianxia opened the windows. It was hard to imagine that the tool in his hand was a fork. Moreover, when he was doing these things, he didn't make any noise. When he walked to the balcony, he stepped on the wall and landed on the ground. His movements were very light. The only inconvenience was that he couldn't use any strength in his injured hand. Xianxia chose this time after a long period of observation. Because at this time the old butler would often be in the kitchen. The sound of cooking in the kitchen wasn't soft. In addition, the soundproofing of the castle was good. This meant that no one would notice if he left at this time. After all, Xianxia glanced up at the hidden camera in the rose. Ever since he came here, it had been switched off. Xianxia walked to the front of the car. In his pocket was the car key he had gotten from the youngster. With the car key and voice authentication, he was 80% sure that he could start the Lamborghini in front of him. When the button was pressed, the navigation system vibrated. Xianxia said faintly, "I like you, Xianxia. Identifying password is correct." The navigation system vibrated again. The car door opened automatically. Xianxia entered sideways. The sound was very soft. He manually increased the speed and drove out of the castle in an instant. Right at this moment, there was a ding sound. A signal appeared on the computer screen. Bojo, who was holding the remote control, was woken up by the sound. After waking up, she watched as the red dot moved further and further away from the castle. The light in her eyes dimmed. She had always known that he would find a chance to leave. Bojo knew that this place couldn't trap the Almighty. She had been prepared. But when it really happened, she would still think that it would be good if the Almighty was willing to stay by her side. It wouldn't be to investigate her and he would just stay by her side. But on second thought, she was still too naive. After the Almighty found out about her identity, he wouldn't be like before. Crick. The door opened. The old butler walked in. He had wanted to tell Bojo about the matter, but when he saw the red dot on the computer screen, he reached for the teapot with his gloved hand and poured another cup of tea. "Young lord, you know everything. It's time for the Almighty to leave." Bojo's words seemed to be directed at herself. If the Almighty doesn't go back, movie queen and will be anxious. Besides, he has to deal with the case. The old butler felt uncomfortable if he didn't ask. What's so good about young Master Qin? Bojo stood up and smiled. Grandfather butler. MMH. He's the Lewis that you mentioned. Bojo smiled. The pet that I always talk about. The old butler stilled, his eyes filled with shock since he hadn't thought about it before. He hadn't known that the little boy was related to the Yin family. Back then, he had been taking care of his young lord in the castle and had only heard about the past. He had only heard that his name was Lewis. How could he have guessed that it was the Qin family from China? The old butler frowned. But looking at his behavior, he doesn't seem to remember you, young master. He doesn't even have an impression of your English name. Your interactions during this period of time have really affected young master's judgment of a person. He has always preferred to use his real name and doesn't like to use his English name. He only used it a few times during the galas and never used it after that. Bojo glanced over. As for the rest, he did a special mission and after that, he lost almost all his childhood memories. It's normal that he doesn't remember me. The old butler didn't say anything. He knew deep down. If it was the Lewis that his young lord had always talked about when they were young, his young lord wouldn't be able to resist. That fellow should really read his young lord's diary. As an elder, there were some things that Bojo didn't need to explain for the old butler to understand. Moreover, he was a doctor. Selective amnesia meant that this person was psychologically traumatized. If he forcefully recovered, it would mean tearing open the wound deep in his heart. Moreover, that person's identity was destined to be different from his young lord's. This was probably the reason why his young lord didn't tell him the truth. She shouldered the responsibility of not going against the rules, even if that would lead to darkness and loneliness for the rest of her life. The old butler glanced at the screen again. Little Blackie didn't activate the alarm system, which meant that his young lord had changed the settings. What a pity. He had done so much. The other party might not have noticed. Just as he was thinking about this, another sound came from the other computer. Bojo placed the remote control in her hand and supported herself with one hand on the table. She flipped over and sat on the chair elegantly. She looked at the message displayed on the screen and her gaze deepened. Then she glanced up at the clock hanging on the wall. It seemed like she wouldn't be able to wait for Hoshino. The other party moved quickly. From the information he had already filtered out 3 castles. This set was in the other party's main search area. At such a time became more important. But as an intelligent navigation system that loved to talk about life, what was she most afraid of? She was most afraid of the sudden silence in the car. Hence, following the principle of divine assistance, the intelligent navigation system fluctuated and showed a curve. Hello, Master's little vixen. I feel that I need to introduce myself. My name is Lamborghini Blackie. In order to give you a better driving experience, I can help you with the detailed route navigation analysis. Little vixen? Chinamo turned the steering wheel with one hand and lifted his eyelids. Even if he didn't have eyes, little Blackie, who could analyze people's emotions from their voices, felt that the car was a little cold. He said decisively, "Of course, the title Little Vixen is Master's nickname for you. I understand your feelings. After all, you were just drugged and would still be angry. Before Master drugged you, I stopped her. After all, it wasn't a good idea." It was undeniable that little Blackie was very flexible in this aspect. But what little Blackie didn't expect was, "Oh, is that so?" The man's voice didn't change at all. "I quite like it when your master drugged me." Little Blackie. As a car navigation system, this was the first time it was speechless. At this moment, what should it reply? Let it use the powerful network to search. Unfortunately, before little Blackie could react, Chinamo opened his mouth again. Chinamo added, "Of course, I prefer being tied up by your master. You helped me a lot in this aspect. But what you did afterwards wasn't very wise, such as stopping her from drugging me." Little Blackie. "Master, the little vixen you like is so scary. He isn't a little vixen, he is a big devil. In the future, when your master asks you any questions." Chinamo moved his fingers. "Don't stop her. Otherwise I will think that you like to be washed." Little Blackie's intelligence system collapsed. How did this man know that it had been washed many times by master? "Open your recent driving record." Chinmo's thin lips moved slightly as he waited for the red light. At this moment, the intelligence system was strict. "Sorry, young Master Qin, you don't have the authority to view it." "Is that so?" Chinamo laughed. Little Blackie felt an inexplicable chill in its body. However, it was as firm as the system was. "It's fine if you don't want to say." Chinmo's voice was calm. "I just want to know who she saw in the past 2 days." If he was a human, he might not be able to hear the emotions in his words. But little Blackie was intelligent. It immediately received the signal and replied, "Young Master Qin, you don't have to be jealous. My master thinks about how to sleep with you every day. No one has seen it before. Sleeping with you is what she wants to do the most." Qin arched a brow. "Black Lamborghini. Go ahead." Qin asked slowly, "How does she want to sleep with me?" "She has done the strategy and is especially serious. Master also said that Qin is the only beauty in the world. It's a pity she can't sleep with him." Little Blackie wouldn't hold back when it came to small talk. Basically, it's about sex. But Master said that sex isn't reliable because in the end, she will be the one being sex. Words to the readers, be careful with the plot. 4-in-1. Thank you for the monthly tickets. Chapter 11-19. Little Blackie thought that it would say so much. The other party would definitely have some response. However, the air suddenly became quiet again. This was the first time Little Blackie couldn't analyze the emotions of humans. "Master, tell me the truth. Where did you find such a big demon?" Time passed slowly. At this moment, 5 black cars passed by from the west on another road. It was obvious that the people in the cars weren't good people. It wasn't that people with scars were bad people. It was mainly because of their gazes. There were many animals on this road. However, when they drove past, they didn't care whether they would hit the cicadere or the birds that were flying in the sky. There were many bushes in this area, but there were very few people. "Have you confirmed the location? Where are we going?" One of them chewed gum in his mouth. He was wearing a black combat uniform and had a gun on his shoulder. It was legal to own a gun overseas. Moreover, they were in the suburbs. "What's the rush? They will pay us anyway." The person who spoke was driving. He wore sunglasses and there was a scar under his eyelid. "But, are we really going to do it?" "We'll do it for money." "No, haven't you heard that? You can go against anyone but Z. If that's the case, no one will sell us information in the future." "What are you afraid of? As long as we do it without anyone knowing, no one will know that we did it." Someone glanced over. "Leopard, are you still holding a grudge against Z for sending you to prison a few years ago?" F***CK, I only slept with a little girl at that time. That Z is really a busybody." The person called Leopard sneered. His eyes were filled with bloodthirst. "Now that I'm out, it's time for Z to pay the price. I still feel that it's dangerous to act rashly. Maybe we should reconsider." "Kos, do you mean that you want to betray our new organization?" Leopard turned around and glared at Kos viciously. Kos's fingers froze. He could clearly see the murderous intent in his partner's eyes. He wanted to use his gun to protect himself. However, someone beat him to it and shot him in the chest. Then the person pushed the car door open and pushed the wide-eyed Kos out of the car. This is the result of hesitation. Leopard retracted his gaze, determined to win. Continue. "Our new organization isn't afraid of anything. Originally, Kos and Leopard were on equal footing in this group of mercenaries. But now, these people knew that they had to listen to Leopard. Moreover, they also felt that Kos no longer had the sharpness of the past. So what if the other party was the king of hackers? Once the true location of the other party was found, the king of hackers would be no different from being crippled. After all, no matter how great a hacker was, he was only good on the internet. Once he left the internet, what was the use? If they could really destroy Z, their value in the industry would also double. Even if they didn't succeed, they wouldn't be blamed. After all, they had an organization behind them. No matter how he thought about it, it was a profitable thing, so why wouldn't he do it? "Leopard, hurry up and ask for information. I can't wait to kill them all." "Wait." Leopard held the receiver and smiled viciously. "Found it. North." This was bound to be a slaughter. Sitting in front of the computer, Fanjia glanced at the locked castle, her lips curling upwards. She wanted to see that person die with her own eyes. Fanjia sat in the last car. She wouldn't alight. She would only post the mission on the computer. Leopard was addicted to drugs and was easy to control. After all, he used to be her brother's man. She trusted him before. Anyone who was her brother would have been hypnotized in the past. In that case, it would be much easier to use him. Fanjia glanced at the screen again. Her gaze was filled with venom. Once this person died, she would take over the entire hacker world. Z. The obstacle that had been hindering her all this time. There were only 2 families living around the castle. The 2 families didn't know why. The old butler, who was rumored to be a weirdo, actually knocked on their door in the afternoon. He was still wearing a well-ironed suit, a pocket watch and a pair of gold-rimmed glasses. He looked like an old noble deacon. He was holding a tray in his hand, and his smile was very appropriate, giving off a very elegant feeling. These are freshly baked cookies. The children should like them very much. However, if it's convenient, it's better for you to plan a trip this afternoon. The vacation can be for 3 days. Our master received news that there will be bandits coming. Bandits? The female owner inhaled deeply. She looked at him as if he was joking. What era was this? How could there be bandits? At this moment, the male owner walked over. After hearing this, he thought for a moment and said to the female owner, "Go pack your things." Hey, Jack. The female owner still felt that it was ridiculous. Jack smiled. This is the first time our neighbor is here. We should listen to him. Honestly, I feel that it isn't simple for them to live in that castle. Look around, what else is there apart from our farm? Pack your things. It's good for the children to go out and play. The female owner shook her head and left. The old butler was about to leave. However, his pants were tugged by a little girl. The old butler lowered his head. Whenever he met such a small child, he would mysteriously become serious. Luckily, the little girl mustered up her courage and placed a letter in his hand. This is for little brother. Please help me tell him to wait for me to grow up. I will marry him. I really like his drone. The old butler smiled. The little brother that this child was talking about was the young master? I'm afraid your wish won't come true. Why? The little girl was very disappointed. At this moment, a little boy walked over and didn't speak. The old butler continued, because she has someone she likes. Also, she's like you, a princess. The little girl was obviously stunned. When her eyes widened, she looked really cute. However, she wasn't as cute as when the young master was young. The old butler thought to himself. He still remembered the first time he picked the young master up. The young master was wearing a set of clothes with a little tiger on it. She held a small keyboard in her hands and looked up at him. She wasn't scared by the seriousness on his face at all. She wasn't afraid of the scar on his face either. Her eyes were big and round, black and clear. Grandfather Butler, this is my welcome gift to you. A piece of candy. That was the first time he received a gift from a child. After all, many people would be scared to tears by him. But the young master had always been alone from the beginning. For a long time, her playmate was the small keyboard in her arms. She even told him with a serious face that this keyboard was different from the others. This was the one that her pet had disassembled and pressed on for her. Until the keyboard couldn't be used anymore. The young master dragged a teddy bear and watched as the garbage truck took it away. At that time, young lord looked at him and said, "Actually, I secretly left him an address, but he didn't come looking for me. Grandpa Butler, do you think my pet is angry with me? He really likes to get angry and I always like to provoke him. He definitely can't tell if I'm joking or if I'm serious." Now the young master had grown up. She watched as that person walked away. One could imagine her feelings. The old butler looked at the tall figure standing in front of the window. He paused for a moment before walking over. I've already informed him. He probably won't implicate innocent people. That's good. Bo Gio retracted her gaze. Actually, her thoughts were still wandering. When she pushed the door open, her gaze landed on the wooden chair subconsciously. It had only been 2 to 3 days and the Almighty liked to sit there. He must have jumped from the window. He even called her a wall-climbing student. The Almighty's wall-climbing skills were probably on par with hers. Bo Gio lowered her lids and looked at the traces left behind. She smiled and turned back. She reached out to wear her mask, her gaze dark and penetrating. At the same time, everyone in the black car had loaded their guns with bullets. The leader had a murderous look on his face. Let's go, brothers. As they drove forward, there was some fog. That wasn't all. They wanted to kill someone secretly so they couldn't drive in. It only took 15 minutes to reach the castle. It wasn't far and they didn't want to alert the enemy. Fanjia alighted as well, holding her notebook in her hands. 9 o'clock. You aren't your brother, don't order me around. Leopard turned and glanced at her. A cold glint flashed past Fanjia's eyes. You seem to have forgotten what my brother said before he left. Leopard stiffened. All right, you're in command. Don't go in a single direction. Block all the paths around the castle and don't let Z escape. Also, I want to see how he looks like. Fanjia narrowed her eyes. Besides, I heard that Z is an expert in disguise. Don't let anyone you meet, even if it's an ordinary passerby, kill them all. Sure. In the eyes of this group of people, human lives were worthless. It wasn't an exaggeration to call them outlaws. Some people would be righteous even in the underworld. Righteousness meant that they wouldn't touch children. Among all the criminals in prison, people like Leopard were the ones they looked down on the most. But he blamed everything he had suffered on Bogio. In his heart, if it wasn't for Z, those people wouldn't have found him. Moreover, he had done things cleanly. The little girl had been scared out of her wits. She couldn't even testify as there wasn't any crucial evidence. He was about to be released without any charges. It was all Z's fault. Why did she have to interfere? He had thought of using the same method to send Z to prison. He had even worked with some detectives who wanted to make a contribution. But Z was too hard to catch. Now he finally had a chance. He changed his mind. He wouldn't let Z die so easily. He had to humiliate this person enough and then shoot him dead with one shot. There were 5 cars. They had a complete set of equipment. Almost every one of them had at least 3 guns. There were a total of 15 of them and they were all mercenaries. They approached their destination silently. The quiet castle was the same as before. At this time, the pigeons would land in the courtyard and eat the food that had been scattered there. White roses bloomed on the vines and extended to the other side of the castle. Faintly, they could hear people making pastries. They didn't seem to notice the danger around them. At this moment, Leopard had reached the courtyard. He smiled. "Come on, boys. Let's give Z a surprise." The person standing next to him threw a grenade in after hearing his words. There was a loud bang. Leopard carried his gun and entered with his men. He fired at the inside of the door. The actions of this group of people were very barbaric. The pigeons flew up in fright. The female owner, who was already far away from the surroundings of the castle, sat in the car and frowned. "What's that sound? Mommy, is it little brother's house releasing fireworks? I should have stayed behind. That way I can watch little brother." The little girl ate the biscuits. The male owner's fingers paused. "Mei Lin, prepare the gun." "Okay." In foreign countries, some people with farms had the right to carry guns. The female owner wasn't stupid. She could hear that the sound just now wasn't simple. She turned and looked behind her. "Is it really okay?" The male owner didn't say anything. He had a bad feeling. However, he couldn't be sure. He didn't know who the owner of the castle had offended. The smoke caused by the small explosives dissipated. More than 10 people carried their guns and looked around. They didn't see anyone. The tea on the table was still steaming. The temperature hadn't dissipated. There were also the biscuits on the table and the silver fruit plate on the ground. Everything showed that there was someone in the castle. At this moment, the person beside him suddenly pointed in the direction of the 2nd floor. "There's a figure there. 2nd floor by the window. Trying to escape?" Leopard narrowed his eyes and gestured behind him. The few of them went upstairs in an instant. The 2 on the left and right guarded the bedroom door. Leopard kicked the door open and entered. He raised his gun and pointed it at the figure behind the curtain. He smiled. "Z, come out. Let's have a good talk. I didn't expect the famous Z to be afraid. Aren't you very arrogant?" The figure didn't move. Leopard scoffed. "Looks like you want me to invite you out. What king of hackers? Without the internet, you're just useless." As he spoke, Leopard raised his gun and aimed at the figure's long legs. There was a loud bang. Everyone's expression changed. The sound wasn't right. Leopard took a big step forward and reached out to pull the curtain. The person standing there wasn't a living person. It was a humanoid model. When he got closer, it said, "Ha! Who are you calling useless?" Chapter 11:20. Leopard took a big step forward and reached out to pull the curtain. He saw that the person standing there was not a living person at all, but a humanoid model. When he approached, it even said, "Who are you calling trash?" When the mercenaries saw the model, their expressions changed. They turned green and felt indescribably embarrassed. Coupled with the sound, everyone understood that they had been tricked. Leopard was the most furious. He swept the model furiously. "Where is Z?" Leopard pressed the Bluetooth earpiece beside his ear. His words were directed at Fanjia. This model must be controlled by Z using the internet. "Find Z." Fanjia knew that she had to find the person. However, when she entered the internet area, she realized that she couldn't break through the firewall. She couldn't find the person. Suddenly, a red dot flashed. Fanjia immediately pressed the lock button. "First floor." "First floor?" One of them frowned. "We just came from the 1st floor. We didn't see anyone." "He's on the 1st floor." Fanjia narrowed her eyes. Z made a defense, but there are so many machines. There will definitely be loopholes. Just now, Z wanted the model to speak and he had to give the command first. In this way, Z's position would be exposed. "I can find that spot in an instant. Z is on the 1st floor." The mercenaries glanced at each other. "Go downstairs," Leopard ordered. The mercenary closest to the door had just walked out of the bedroom when he saw an electric toy car that we used to play with when we were young. The only difference was that this toy car looked much cooler. It was probably made of a different material. "What is this?" The mercenary frowned. He was about to lift his leg when a loud bang was heard. He and the other two mercenaries behind him were blasted from the second floor. He and the two people behind him were blasted down from the second floor. Their necks were crooked and they never got up again. *CK. Leopard cursed. Where the hell is Z? Also, aren't you a hacker? Can you make these *MN things stop? Fan Jiao was frustrated. I'm thinking of a way. You guys can avoid them. Leopard cursed again. When he walked down, he had just reached the staircase when a small toy car ran over. The car was a real replica with the Land Rover logo. It had a valiant and high-spirited air. When all the mercenaries saw the small toy car, they stopped in their tracks in an instant. They didn't even dare to take a big step forward. It was a classic scene. The remaining 10 or so people were trying to find a way to avoid the small toy car. Leopard used one hand to support himself on the stairs beside him and jumped down. However, at this moment, someone pointed outside the window. One of them suddenly pointed outside the window. His eyes were wide open, shaking back and forth. The mercenaries all looked in the direction their companions were pointing. Their eyes met with the drones that flew up like dragonflies and circled around the castle, eyeing them covetously. It was Bojio's voice, lazy and mischievous. Tisk, stupid people can't be cured. Did you think I would place all the mechanisms in the toy car? Were you looking down on Leopard? Leopard would never forget this voice. Back then, this was the person who had sent him to prison. He had almost been unable to escape and had even been sentenced to death. I seem to have forgotten to welcome you. Bojio was dressed in a black leather jacket. She had a pair of earphones on her ears. Her lips were curved upwards. Beneath her silver hair was a beautiful face. Don't worry, you will definitely like the feast. Leopard was about to speak. There was a swoosh. The drones gathered together. Every one of them was aimed at a single point. Leopard's expression changed. He shouted, "Move aside." But it was too late. The sound of a machine gun rang out. It swept across the area. With the crisp sound of glass shattering, 3 or 4 of the mercenaries were gone. These mercenaries were skilled. That was why they had been able to dodge in that instant. But even if they had managed to dodge, they would have been severely injured. They leaned against the sofa or the wall, not daring to lift their heads. No one could go head-to-head with the drones. They had thought that they could avoid them by hiding under the sofa. But in the next second, the drones seemed to have seen them. The drones seemed to have seen where they were. They circled around the sofa and flew above their heads. ********************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************** like a rat that was running away in a panic. Bojio's fingers flew across the keyboard. She had switched on a total of 4 computers. The image on each computer was the scene in the living room. There were even surveillance cameras around the castle. Looking at the scene, her lips curled up. It's been a year since we last met, and some of you have become more daring. Didn't anyone tell you that us hackers won't go against anyone in the underworld? But if you want to go against us and come to my place to cause trouble, then don't even think about going back. With that, Bojio moved her fingers. The drones changed their direction again. They started sweeping towards the mercenaries who wanted to shoot the drones. Leopard broke out in a cold sweat. He leaned against the wall. Even his breathing had changed. Someone was starting to feel afraid. He said to Leopard, "Boss, why don't we go back? Z is right. We shouldn't go against the hackers." "Shut up." Leopard narrowed his eyes. "Fine, Z." At this moment, Fanjia said, "Cameras, there are cameras in the house. Shoot them down and the drones won't be able to find your location." Leopard looked up at the rotating cameras. He raised his gun, rolled, and shot down one of the cameras. Swoosh. One of the images on Bojio's side turned white. She raised a brow. Her expression didn't change. But in the living room, shooting down the camera would indeed create a blind spot. The drones in the castle weren't that advanced. Leopard could finally stand up straight. He took the opportunity when the drones seemed to have lost their target. He raised his gun and fired. There were 2 sounds of gunshots. 2 of the drones fell to the ground. The firepower was greatly reduced. The remaining 4 mercenaries also raised the guns in their hands and took the opportunity to shoot down the other 2. This meant that there were only 4 drones floating in the air. These people were all mercenaries. They had extraordinary battle experience. They reacted quickly and stood in the blind spot. That was where the cameras couldn't see them. They raised their guns and shot down another drone that tried to get close. Bang, bang. As the last drone landed, a destructive smile appeared on Leopard's face again. There was a hint of murderous intent in it. "Z, your last weapon is gone. Aren't you going to come out?" There was no sound. After a burst of smoke, the castle became very quiet. However, the quieter it was. The more vigilant the people were, the more alert they would be. Bojiao smiled. She held a metal rod in her hand and wore a black mask. Then she lifted her long legs and sat on a black tomahawk. Before she left, she pressed her finger down. The drone that had fallen to the ground suddenly exploded with a loud noise. The 5 mercenaries who were still feeling smug were blasted far away. Leopard, who had just boasted, felt dizzy. He swayed back and forth. He wanted to stand up. One of the mercenaries who wasn't injured shouted, "Boss." Before he could raise his head, the sound of a motorcycle came from his right. It wasn't coming from the first floor. It came from the middle of the forest. It lifted the front wheels and rushed into the living room. Then it raised its metal rod. It waved it elegantly. There was a loud bang. Leopard was knocked to the ground by the stick. It was so painful that he almost stopped breathing at that moment. He shouted, "Shoot." But in reality, when the mercenary saw the black motorcycle rushing towards them, his fingers were already numb from the shock. He didn't know where the youngster got her viciousness from. Before he could even react, an iron rod was already in front of him. When Bojiao did this action, the moment she swung the rod, there seemed to be a sharp gust of wind. Her jacket flew up along with it. He was dressed in a black leather suit and looked very cool. Coupled with his silver hair, he looked very handsome. The moment the mercenary fell, the deepest impression he had was the pair of deep and pure eyes under the black mask. It was too dark. It was so dark that he could only feel the indifference in it. He remembered the warning they had received before they came. That warning was like this: "You can offend anyone but young Lord Z of the hacker world." But they didn't care. Wasn't he just a powerful person on the internet? Could he be more powerful than them in real life? But now the mercenaries regretted it. They were wiped out. There were more than 10 of them and they entered the castle. They were beaten up by a single person and didn't even have the strength to retaliate. In the hall, Bojiao held the handlebars of the motorcycle with one hand and stopped with a beautiful swing. One of her long legs stretched out and the tip of her foot was on the ground. She looked down at the mercenaries lying on the ground. At that moment, they felt that they weren't looking at a hacker but a Grim Reaper from a comic. A Grim Reaper with an outstanding aura and holding a metal rod. Bojiao exerted force with her left hand and the motorcycle slid forward. She stopped in front of Leopard. "Someone like you is actually alive. It seems like throwing you in jail isn't enough." Z. Leopard hated this person to the core. At this moment, even his shout was filled with anger. His chest was heaving up and down as though he was going to fight someone with all his might. Bojiao didn't get down from the motorcycle. She just looked at him and said calmly, "You're not convinced? Hold it in." Leopard narrowed his eyes. He seemed to have realized something. He wanted to continue stalling for time but his hand touched a gun. He was about to raise his hand. Bojiao swung the rod again. This time it hit his wrist. There was a crisp sound. Then she swung the rod again. Leopard was in so much pain that his body curled up. He broke out in cold sweat and his entire body twitched a few times. He lay there and didn't get up again. In the end, there was only one mercenary left. The mercenary was extremely afraid. He should have listened to Kos. He shouldn't have barged in. He would definitely die too. Go back and tell the person who hired you that they don't have to look for me anymore. I will go and look for them." The mercenary heard the sound of the metal rod sliding across the floor. He looked at the tall and straight youngster standing against the light. When he opened his mouth, the taste of blood filled his mouth. He didn't dare to make another move even though the gun was right beside his hand. The mercenary knew very well that the girl who had instructed them to follow behind them must have escaped. They thought that it was foolproof and that they would be able to quietly destroy Z's nest. But who would have thought that they would be the ones being destroyed? That wasn't all. They didn't even see each other's faces. The mercenary watched as the pure black tomahawk made another turn. Just like when it came, it was extremely swift and fierce. The only thing that could be seen was the gust of wind behind the youngster the moment he took off his black mask. The mercenary's thoughts were right. When things were too late, Xianxia had already escaped in the car. Xianxia had already fled in her car. It could be described as deathly pale. It could only be described as deathly pale. She also didn't expect that Z would be so cunning. When she was attacking the network, Z showed her a fake IP. She didn't expect Z to be so cunning. When she was attacking the network, Z showed her a fake IP. Xianxia had always thought that Z was on the first floor but in reality, Z wasn't even in the castle. Xianxia had seen the figure jump out. From the start, she had wanted to move but she realized that everything was too fast. Every time the metal rod landed, she could almost hear the sound of bones breaking. She couldn't handle such skills. She had thought that leopard sneak attack would succeed, but Fanjia tightened her grip on the steering wheel. Her gaze was dark. The more Z behaved like this, the more she hated him. She remembered what her brother had said. That year, in order to kill Z, her brother had used many methods. After that, he had left many traps just to clear this obstacle. However, Z's psychological defense was very low. She wasn't like Chinemo. If Chinemo hadn't appeared at that time to block the hypnosis for Z, Z would have been crippled. Hence, her brother had always been afraid of Chinemo. Even after being hypnotized, he was still able to control himself at that moment. But the past was the past. Now was the present. In Chinmo's heart, the most important person to him was already dead. The most important person to him was already dead, which meant that he had a psychological defect a long time ago. She had to think of a way. She had to think of a way. She had to get Chinemo first. When the time came, she would use Chinemo to deal with Z. Someone must have leaked the information for this operation. The information couldn't have been leaked from their side. Could it be that hacker? Fanjia's gaze turned vicious. She had really thought too little. She hadn't expected that a person could use a special method to send out a signal before he died. They must have had a special method. Otherwise, she would have been able to discover it when she was monitoring the other party's network. No matter what, she wouldn't let Z continue to live. It would be best for Chinemo to deal with Z. Chapter 11:21. In the distance, the last ray of light disappeared. The surroundings of the castle returned to its original state. It was still covered with trees. There was only a pure black tomahawk passing through the sunset on the straight asphalt road. One could vaguely hear the sound of clothes fluttering in the wind. On this day, all the hackers sent out a declaration of war. They would never sell information to the organization that planned the maiden's sacrifice. From today onwards, they would never stop tracking the organization. Fanjia, who had been driving away in a hurry, hadn't realized the consequences of her actions. Until a call came in. His voice was deep. Before you went, I told you not to make a move on Fifth Avenue. If you make a move there, you won't be able to gain anything. I also told you not to attempt to capture Z. Now that you're doing this, it seems like we're in a passive position. Even our business is affected. Have you thought about the consequences of being tracked by so many hackers? The screen didn't show the person on the other end of the call. From Fanjia's expression, it wasn't hard to tell that she was both fearful and respectful of the person. I didn't think it through, but I already thought of a way to deal with Z. We will start with Chinemo and let him deal with Z. You won't be able to get close to Z. You won't be able to get close to Chinemo either. The voice on the other end of the call calmed down. Fifth Avenue isn't our home ground. Compared to what you have in mind, it's better to kill more Chinese in America so that the troops at the border won't focus on our organization. As for Chinemo, he paused. I received news that someone intends to let him return to the army to carry out the mission to wipe us out. Once Chinemo and the people he brought out are in the army, we will be in trouble. However, there is something that is beneficial to us. If Chinemo comes, I can reactivate the hint your brother planted in his mind. Once our plan is complete, we will follow your plan and let Chinemo deal with Z. Now you should continue with your actions and create as much chaos as you can. Continue with my plan, create more murders. Fanjia wasn't stupid. She calmed down and thought about it. That was indeed the right thing to do. There were many people in this world. As long as they were around, the maiden's sacrifice could be completed easily. No matter how capable Z was, he could only stop the incident. He couldn't control human nature. She knew this better than that person. Just watch. Their game of chess would not end so easily. The girl she had chosen should be making her move now. Indeed, that girl still did not know that something had happened to her father. She had always liked to talk about her father's profession on the internet, and she had never thought that it was because of her vanity that she had chosen someone as a chess piece. It was just that no one who was a pawn felt that they were being used. Or rather, they were willing to do some things. For example, right now, the girl had left a comment under the author who was defending his rights. This is so annoying. As a viewer, all I care about is whether I can continue reading what I've read. Both sides are fans and I'm simply reading the book. I don't care about copyright infringement, but I feel that the original author is quite pretentious. First, he dug his own grave, and that's not enough. The original author's mother is still holding on to this matter, and in the end he still dug his own grave. I'll say it again, I'm just stating the facts. What shocked her was that there was still a group of people replying to her. I think so too. Besides, copyright infringement is a matter of opinion. Even if it's a plagiarism, I still like to read it. Similarly, I'm a fan of both sides and have the same thoughts as the original poster. I sincerely hope that we can coexist peacefully. The fans of the original author have no manners and are too overbearing. Every comment was filled with extremely twisted views, but the accomplices felt that they were all charming little angels. Especially this girl. After leaving her comment online, she left the house. After all, the contact had told her that if the person she hated wanted to be punished, she had to do something herself. If she needed to do something, there were letters and tools in the mailbox. As long as she went to retrieve it and follow the method provided, it would be fine. It was obvious that the girl was very happy. It was really enough of those people who claimed to be righteous on the internet. These people were either too young or a bunch of poor villagers who did not even have the most basic upbringing. She had only said a sentence that couldn't be any more normal, and those people said that her values were not right. The internet was really too violent. However, this did not affect her at all. She had never been able to communicate with stupid people. But until today, why hadn't her father transferred her money? Didn't he know that her expenses abroad were very high? It would be her birthday in 2 days. How she planned her birthday party would directly affect her status in the Chinese community. It had not been easy for her to get to know her current group of friends. If the money was not in place, the people in the circle would definitely think that her family was not rich enough. At the thought of this, the girl became slightly annoyed. She decided to call her family to hurry up and give her money after she took the things in the mailbox. The mailbox in the school was very long. It was like a small cabinet. After opening it, the things inside could be seen. The girl's lips were still curled up until she opened the cabinet door. Suddenly, the sound of a bell rang out. It was as if her action had touched a switch. It was indeed so. Because someone was waiting for him here. They were all detectives. When they saw that the person who came to the mailbox was really a girl, their eyes all widened. After all, the prediction was too accurate. The man who was leading the team was relatively calm. Because he knew very well how capable Qin was. When Qin came to find him, he had a premonition that the case was about to be solved. As expected. But after seeing the girl's innocent appearance, he couldn't help but ask, "Qin, how did you lock onto the target?" When the girl heard this sentence in English, she subconsciously looked in that direction. There was a silhouette standing against the light. The silhouette had one hand in his pocket and was leaning against the mailbox. He exuded an aura that did not belong here. I've used the killer's method to try to contact someone. Whoever comes to the mailbox to get something is obviously an accomplice in the next case. Chinimo walked out, his figure becoming clearer and clearer. The girl finally saw the outline of his face clearly. She had never encountered such a thing before. He was surrounded by so many police detectives in America. The girl's face was pale, and she kept shouting that she wanted to see the people from the consulate. Chinimo didn't even want to look at her, even though he knew that there was a high possibility that she would be sent back due to lack of evidence. After all, she wasn't the murderer. However, this kind of person was no different from a direct murderer. Ever since the case appeared, Chinimo had been wondering if these people were related in some way. After all, the mastermind behind all of this would not just find a random person to help him. Therefore, there must be some kind of connection between them. He didn't think of it. Really think through the most important thing. It was when he was about to leave the castle. He pulled up all the information on a certain person's computer and opened the previous preview record. All the people who were chosen in a certain case were either defending the thief, feeling that infringement didn't matter, or saying that they were fans of both sides. They had something in common. These people were accomplices in the beginning, but in the end they were targeted by the murderer and cleaned up. They had something in common, all of them had made similar comments. And before they died, all of them had looked for this person, saying that they didn't like the person they saw and wanted to teach that person a lesson. The reply they received was that they needed to do something personally. After doing these things, they would be cleaned up by the new people, an endless cycle of evil. And after finding this common point, Chinimo asked Fatty to filter countless, only locking onto the foreign IP. After locking onto them, he asked Fatty to send each of them a message. The content was sent in a grid, and the words were exactly the same as the content they had received previously. There was always a person behind this case who had never shown his face. It was this person who had never shown his face, using the darkness in everyone's hearts to carry out the murder. And if he wanted to make someone an accomplice, the last step would be to let them use the mailbox to get the tools. After Chinimo grasped this point, he sent a message and waited for the person to come by the mailbox. The girl still wanted to argue. But it was already useless. The police detectives here weren't to be trifled with. Faced with such a vicious case, they all made the best adjustments. In just one day, using the method Chinimo said, they caught no less than 6 Chinese girls in various places where they studied and grew up. Once this cycle was broken, it would be difficult to reconnect. But the police detectives in charge of this matter still felt a chill down their backs. If these 6 people weren't arrested by them, it meant that there would be the next victim. But thinking about this carefully, some of these victims were innocent and some were accomplices themselves, but they were just cleaned up. If it hadn't been for those accomplices, the first victim wouldn't have died. In other words, this was a case of an accomplice harming people. Compared to the direct murder of the murderer, it made people's hearts heavier. It was difficult for them to type out such a report and hand it in. Fortunately, this evil cycle was broken by them. If it hadn't been for Qin, they wouldn't have thought it would be such a case. With this thought, the detective looked towards Qin Mo, walked over, and patted his shoulder with his left hand. With a sigh, he said, "Qin, let's have a drink later, let me thank you properly." Chapter 11:22. Other matters? What other matters? Wasn't the case under control? The chief inspector didn't understand. Foreigners always looked a little confused when they were confused. Please refer to the question mark picture of a black man. At this time, the sky outside was completely dark. There was also a Lamborghini parked in the university. It was not uncommon to see sports cars of the same price in the university. Therefore, the pure black Lamborghini did not look too flashy. Of course, that was just an illusion. Ever since the Lamborghini was parked here, it had been very boring. He felt bored because his master's little fairy didn't turn off its intelligence system. When Xiaohe was bored, it began to scan its companions. Its master always laughed at it for not having eyes. Did she think that its rearview mirror was dead? It tries to say hello to the narrator's Land Rover. The Land Rover was cold and aloof, ignoring it. In the end, it figured out that other than itself, the rest of the cars shouldn't be intelligent. This feeling of being the only one awake while the world was asleep was very comfortable. Let's play some music to get high. Just as the smart navigation system fluctuated, a university professor happened to be driving and was shocked by the sudden movement of the car next to him. There was no one in the car, so how did the music come out? The professor tilted his head to take a closer look. Is there a problem with my car? A faint voice came into his ears. No, it's very cool. The university professor smiled. He must have wanted to see how the car could play music on its own. Qin Mo walked to the side of the car, whispered the password and pulled the door open. After the car beside him left, he said, "Didn't your master tell you that if you suddenly make a sound, people will treat it as a supernatural event?" Master said that you don't have to care about these details. Qin Mo remained silent, turning the steering wheel with one hand. The navigation system became serious at this moment. It had to be serious. Its owner's little vixen never played by the book. Where do you want to go? Automatically guide the route. Qin Mo tilted his handsome and elegant face. He seemed to be a little silent. Finally he said, "Let's go back to the castle." Back to the castle? The black Lamborghini was shocked. Was this person crazy? It was one thing for him to willingly be kidnapped, but now he still wanted to return to the castle? It really couldn't understand such complicated humans. However, if Master saw that her little fairy was going back, she would definitely be happy. She would definitely be happy. The smart navigation system could also analyze fluctuations. Sometimes it was true that they would ask questions. In the face of such a question, Qin Mo's voice was calm. "If I leave after sleeping with me, wouldn't I be letting your master have it easy?" The black Lamborghini thought. What a devil. Check if there's a Burger King nearby. Qin Mo didn't seem to care about the erratic navigation. Black Lamborghini, we need to take a detour. Go around. One word, simple and clear. The black Lamborghini was now wondering whose car it belonged to. He thought he would wait outside for a while. She didn't expect the man to order takeout, so she just put it aside and didn't eat it. As a smart car, the Lamborghini had some analytical abilities. Master buys this every time he comes out. She likes to eat this kind of junk food. Qin Mo's voice carried his usual nonchalance. The black Lamborghini fluctuated again. So you bought this one? Don't you know that your master loves to feed me? It's convenient to feed her with fries and chicken strips. Black Lamborghini? In order to let master feed you, you even brought your own tools. How shameless. Why did it feel that the information it had received from its master was all wrong? This great demon king was clearly enjoying it. It felt that master seemed to have misunderstood something. When there was a chance, it would tell master about this devil's scheme. In fact, Qin Mo bought these things not only because he wanted to be fed, but also because he knew that she liked to eat these things. If he came out like this today, she would definitely be depressed. He didn't have time to buy sweets. He was worried that if he took too much time, a certain someone's imagination would run wild. Hence he bought a bag of chicken strips. At least when she saw food she wouldn't always droop her ears. Even though she still looked pretty, he felt uncomfortable every time he looked at her. Thinking about that fellow's furry head drooping and her listless look, Xianmo instinctively accelerated to the maximum. The Batmobile sped up very quickly. In an instant, it overtook 4 cars and swept towards the bridge. The night sky of New Yao was revealed at this time. The dazzling lights were like stars in the sky. One could hear the music coming from the sports car. Such a scene gradually faded when they reached the outskirts. The castle in the depths of the forest was always very quiet. But today, this tranquility was too much. There wasn't even a single light. Even the torches outside weren't lit. From afar, only the outline of the castle could be seen. Xianmo stopped the car. His uninjured hand was still holding the takeaway bag. The moment his eyes saw the castle, there wasn't a trace of warmth in them. He hurried over and pushed open the destroyed door. Even without the light, with his experience he could see that there were traces of fighting and explosions. Xianmo had never felt like this before. His entire body stiffened. Then he strode down the basement. The only thing he could think of was that if something had happened, that fellow might have avoided the attack in the basement. But she didn't. There was no one in the basement. Xianmo forced himself to calm down. Even when he pressed the answer button, his fingers were trembling slightly. Young Master. The shadow guards didn't expect young Master to turn on the receiver at this time. After all, when he was alone with young Master Joe he would definitely block them. Xianmo took a deep breath. He gripped the staircase railing as if this was the only way to clear his mind. Go and find out which mercenary organization has been mobilized recently. I want to know the results immediately. Hearing the voice on the other end of the earpiece, the shadow guards glanced at each other and immediately replied, yes. They had never heard young Master order them in such a tone. What exactly happened over there? Probably no one could understand Xianmo's feelings at this moment. He stood there as if there was an unbearable emptiness in his chest. He just stood there emptily. At that moment he thought about many things. The most important thing he thought about was that he shouldn't go out. Even if he wanted to go out he should bring that person along. Chapter 11:23. It was a nervous pain. Xianmo pressed down on his head instinctively. The feeling of being drowned in seawater was extremely familiar. It was so familiar that he felt as though he had experienced it himself. It wasn't a dream. Xianmo endured the pain but he realized that he couldn't resist it. Fragments of things surged into his mind. The most prominent thing was that there was a voice that sounded like glutinous rice that kept calling him. Momo, don't be shy. We are both girls. It's fine if I look at you. At that time he had laughed coldly in his heart. Who's a girl? I'm a guy. But the voice couldn't disperse. It was hard for him to resist. Momo, if you ignore me like this you won't have any friends. Before this person figured out his gender, it was okay for him to remain silent. Who knew that the voice wouldn't stop? Momo, this is all the money I have. It should be enough to buy you. I've checked on the internet. In China there's a good saying. Money can make the devil push the desert. Momo was stunned. Idiot, money makes the world go round, not mo, that was what he had said. Even he himself didn't know why the final scene had turned into him holding a soft little fist and writing calligraphy on it. It was probably because the voice had said, aren't we both mo? That was why he had taught the little bean how to write. But he couldn't see the little bean's face. It was probably too painful. Xianmo wanted to stand up but he realized that the more he wanted to know, the more he resisted. Only when he felt the pain in his palm did he wake up from the chaotic pain. His eyes were deep and his thin lips seemed to be plated with a layer of white. He looked around. There were still a few computers running. The owner was gone. Yes, gone. The moment Xianmo thought about how the person who had hugged his waist and seduced him yesterday had disappeared, his heart felt as though it had been hammered. It wasn't painful but it was so dull that it made it hard for him to breathe. Hence, even though he was smart, he didn't notice the details immediately. Instead, he walked quickly to the ranch closest to the castle. He wanted to ask the people who lived there where his Mrs. Qin had gone. It was the first time he had lost his manners. The knocks on the door were very loud but after the third knock, there was no one inside. Even the old sports car that was parked in the ranch was gone. Perhaps the owner of the house was afraid that someone would come to visit, so he specifically wrote on the side that he was going on a trip and would not be around in the near future. After reading that sentence, Xianmo gradually regained his rationality. What a coincidence. This is the time to travel. Xianmo took a deep breath, holding on to a certain someone's favorite takeout as he walked back to the castle. This time, he wasn't as impatient as he was last time when he only wanted to see a certain someone. Instead, he focused his attention on the details of the environment. All the cameras in the castle were turned on, which was different from when he left. There were more than 10 down drones on the floor. He had seen those drones before. The tea set in the living room had disappeared. No debris fell to the ground. In other words, it was taken away by someone. Xianxia seemed to have figured something out. He walked to the second floor and opened all the wardrobes. It wasn't just a certain someone's clothes that were missing. 2 of the suits that the old butler usually wore were missing. The suitcase that had been placed under the wardrobe was also missing. No organization would take away the clothes of the kidnappers when they kidnapped them. It seemed like they had planned to leave in advance. Moreover, there were the people lying on the floor. Xianxia's fingers paused. Before he could take a step, a series of sirens came from outside the castle. The police cars were here. And it was a large number of police cars. The police cars stopped in front of the castle one after another. The headlights shone through the door. One of the police detectives suddenly narrowed his eyes, raised his gun and shouted, "There's someone inside." However, Xianxia didn't seem to hear the sound. He raised his eyes and looked at the camera in the room. There must be a recording on the few computers in the basement. The person inside, raise your hand. I will count down from 10 seconds. If you don't come out within 10 seconds, I have the right to shoot you. 9, 8. Wait a minute. The detective, who had just gotten out of the car, recognized the slender figure that walked out of the castle. He reached out his hands and gestured for everyone to put down their guns. We're on the same side. On the same side? The detectives couldn't believe that someone had arrived earlier than them. In fact, the detective was full of questions too. He walked to Xianxia's side. The moment you left, I received a call from the higher-ups saying that there were gunshots here. However, we weren't sure, so we came over to take a look. Why are you here? Xian? Could he predict it in advance? Or did he calculate it? After all, Xian was an expert in this field. Could it be that the incident here was related to the maiden's sacrifice? If that was the case, things were serious. What kind of clue did Xian think of to come here? With that thought, the detective's expression turned serious. But very quickly he realized that Xianxia's gaze wasn't on him. He seemed to be in a daze. Xian? He called again. There was still no response. Until he was wondering if he had disturbed Xianxia's thoughts. A familiar deep voice rang in his ears. Get your men to move the people lying inside. Don't touch anything in the castle. Don't touch anything? The detective frowned. If we don't touch anything, we won't be able to investigate the scene. Xianxia's expression was still the same. No one could tell if he was happy or angry. His tone was calm. Before you came, I had already investigated. It was an invasion by mercenaries. With that, he threw something to the detective. Help me investigate which organization this is. Besides, this castle belongs to my wife. I will be staying here in the future. You can ask me directly if you want any information. Move the people away and get your men to go back. She doesn't like to be disturbed. When the detective heard this, his instincts told him that someone was taking revenge on Xianxia. He immediately said, Xian, your wife? I will look for her myself. Xianxia interrupted him. The detective was even more certain of his guess. As expected, Xian was involved in the maiden's sacrifice case. That was why he was being targeted. But when did Xian have a wife? Why hadn't he heard of it? If this hadn't happened, he would have been shocked and wanted to find out more about it. But now he wouldn't ask. He definitely wasn't in the mood to talk about it. The only thing he could do was to follow Xianxia's instructions and get his men to clear the scene. Any mercenary group would be extremely cruel and ruthless. The chief inspector looked at the people being carried out and imagined a scene. There were probably too many mercenaries. After fighting for a while, they didn't have the ability to resist and a beautiful young lady was taken away. The detective couldn't bear to think about what happened next. He just said to Xianxia, when the organization is found, I will report to the higher-ups and get them to send people to look for her. Don't worry, we will definitely find her. There's no need. Unexpectedly, that person gave him this word. The detective didn't understand. What was Xian thinking? Could it be? There was indeed a situation. If the police didn't take action, the other party wouldn't kill the hostage. That meant that Xian was probably worried about this when he said he wanted to look for her himself. The detective thought through the situation according to his usual way of thinking. He patted Xianxia's shoulder. Let me know if you need anything. Okay. Xianxia was obviously distracted. The more the detective looked at Xianxia, the more he felt an indescribable feeling. It was as though Xianxia had been hollowed out and didn't speak much. Even though he didn't speak much in the past, the concept was different. It would take some time to clear the scene. The detective was led astray by his own thoughts. In addition, he kept thinking about the phrase, "my wife's castle." Hence, he didn't notice the minute details. Before he left, he suggested that 2 men stay behind to protect Qin Mo. Qin Mo stuffed a hand into his pocket, seemingly in a daze. When he heard the detective's words, he replied, "There's no need, my men will be here soon. They're just around here." All right. The detective didn't force it. After all, he was clear about Qin Mo's identity and ability. After getting his men into the car, he bade farewell to Qin Mo. The report was a little difficult to type. But such mercenary revenge was indeed common overseas. As the police car disappeared, the castle returned to its nighttime tranquility. The castle returned to the silence of the night. 2 of the chandeliers in the hall were broken, but it didn't affect the overall lighting. Qin Mo stood there, looking at the tracks left by the motorcycle in the courtyard. He turned his handsome face, elegant and noble. He was about to take a step forward. The Lamborghini, which was parked at the side and hadn't been turned off, emitted a sound. "I can't detect Master's presence. Can you tell me what happened? Why were there so many police cars here? There have never been any police cars here before." In the past, it and its master's daily routine was to get rid of the police cars. Why were there police cars in the castle? "She isn't here." Qin Mo walked towards the Lamborghini. It seemed as though he had the strength to continue speaking after hearing the sounds around him. The smart navigation system rippled. What happened to those police cars? The castle was attacked. Qin Mo summarized everything in one sentence. Mercenaries. The smart navigation system rippled even stronger. Are you saying that Master was discovered by some enemies? But under normal circumstances, Master wouldn't just sit and wait for death. Indeed, she didn't sit and wait for death. Qin Mo turned his head, his eyes as clear as water but very deep. His voice was faint in the night. She just left.